Vrindavan Mataji for very warm introduction. So I was requested to say a few words about myself. Not much to say, but I've been practicing actively since 1989. Hare Krishna. My background is Russian, and I come from a Muslim family, which could be peculiar for some of you. And so my first, I've been traveling around the world since last perhaps 15 to 20 years, and luckily I've been to Potomac temple before. It's wonderful to see you all again. And the very first book I've been really fascinated by was Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and still studying Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And so today is a special day, the first day of Bhishma Panchaka, Vrata and Uttana Ekadashi. And we'll be reading from Bhagavad Gita one of the verses which is connected to our topic, which is developing intuition. So we will start with offering our prayers to the spiritual masters, starting with Srila Prabhupada and Vaishnavas and the Supreme Lord, and then we'll read one of the verses and say a few words about it, and then have some discussion, or maybe even some practice as well. Let's see how it will go. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyanandana Shalokaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapanantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubheva Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bhutay Mahaprema Puravibur Nirmaya Kshatir Mushupurusha Bhangte Gunan Sudasa Sudasatmakaya Lankrishishta Bhagavan Vacham Sime Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So, as it was already mentioned, that intuition is really coming from the Lord in the heart, and so the topic is discussed in Bhagavad Gita quite thoroughly. So it's one of the really important topics for us to understand and practice. Of course, the question is, how do we practice developing our intuition? And we'll say a few words about it. And the text, one of the texts on the subject, is from the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is Dhyana Yoga, Meditational Yoga, text number 7. Jitatmana prasantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tatha manapamanayoho. For one who has conquered the mind, the supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. And incidentally, when Bhagavad Gita says man, doesn't particularly refer to males only, but refers to humans. Right? So, Prabhupada explains in the purport, actually every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One who is to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the Supreme Nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or Supersoul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely stress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. End of the purport. Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukha dukhishu tatha manapamanayoho. For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. So, to be connected to the Supreme Lord in the heart is a great advantage, because we are suffering in our lives due to mistakes we make. But Super Soul makes no mistakes, because this is the all-perfect Supreme Lord. And so it's very easy to live life without any mistakes, without any troubles. We just have to be connected to the Super Soul in the heart, because we're kind of connected, but those connections are regularly interrupted, right? Like sometimes you have your internet connection interrupted. So in the same way, our connection with the Super Soul is also interrupted by the influence of the three modes of nature. And many times when something bad happens to us, we say the all-famous, I knew that, right? How many of you had that experience? So yes, how do we become free from these influences, the interruptions? And so this verse explains that the first obstacle is our mind. So one who has conquered the mind can reach the Super Soul. So that's why we have mantra, right? Mantra means the process which liberates us from the influence of the mind, materialistic influences. So that's why the Supreme Lord himself, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is stressing the importance of chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then it starts the process of delivering the mind from all, the influence of the modes of nature. And the mind is also quite a subject of Bhagavad Gita. There are many verses related to the mind and functions of the mind, because we need to understand how to control it. And so mind is an interesting device which has binary functions. Those of you who are familiar with IT, you know that the computers are programmed with very simple code, binary code, right? Zeros and ones, right? So mind is also programmed in a binary way, so it it is accepting and rejecting things, right? And so, as long as we are influenced by the mind, we cannot really connect to the supersoul. And so that's really the first step in developing our intuition, developing our connection with the supersoul, to become free from those, we can say, like pendulum swing, right? And how do we do that? The process is quite, we can say, not very common, that we have to stop the mind from jumping from, desire and hatred. Stop this influence of duality. And there are things which we like in our lives, and there are things which we dislike. And then in order to stop that pendulum, we have to go the other way. That we have to learn to accept things we dislike. That's called Tapasya. And Tapasya is the first step in our spiritual advancement, right? Tapodivyam putrakayana sapam. And so that's the process. And also to control our likes. That's another type of tapasya. So that's how we advance spiritually. And of course, it's not necessarily that we have to give up everything we like and we have to accept everything we dislike. That would be too hard. So that's why you need guidance in the spiritual life. And spiritual life is really dependent on developing higher taste. Luckily, in Krishna consciousness, we have positive alternative for everything. So it's not too hard to give something our mind likes and dislikes, because we give him higher taste. Param drištva nivartate. And second very important step to take is to start developing ourselves on a spiritual platform. To stop material influence is just the first stage, but second is to establish ourselves on a spiritual platform. As we know, we are parts of the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme Lord is Satchitananda Vigraha, and therefore we as spirit souls are also Satchitananda. So how do we practically realize our spiritual nature? There are certain things we have to do in the service of the Lord. So basically speaking, intuition is the influence of the supersoul upon us, and it seems to be very esoteric, difficult subject to understand, but Srila Prabhupada said 90% of Krishna consciousness is common sense. So there is no mystery, it's all spiritual science. And therefore, it's very simple that as long as we do things the Lord wants us to do, we'll be successful, happy, and will benefit not only ourselves but others from whatever we are doing. And so that's the principle, to connect to the Supreme Lord. And there are 3 steps we have to make in that regard. Sat, Chit, Ananda. So how does that translate in practical life? Sat, as Bhagavad Gita says, Sat Bhave Sadhu Bhave Cha, right? That the Sat aspect is connected to association with devotees. So that's why Sadhu Sangha is so important. And most important aspect of Sadhu Sangha is guidance from the sadhus. Guidance which is taken from those who already established themselves on the spiritual platform. And so, basically speaking, it's very simple. In any activity, you need to take guidance. So the first question, whatever you want to do, ask yourself this very simple question. Am I blessed by the sadhu, by the guru to do that? If I have the blessing, then this is the first step, but it's not enough to have the blessing. Second step is chit. Chit means knowledge. And not just knowledge, but experience. And so, second question to ask ourselves is that it's not enough to be blessed. It's also important to understand, do I know enough about that field of activity? Am I expert in this? Would I be able to do that? So, if this is the field of my expertise, yes, this is the second step. And the third one is, of course, Ananda. That means, do I really have inspiration? Because there are two positions in our lives. We are either inspired or expired, or anything in between. These are the two sides, right? But then there are many shades and grades in between being inspired and expired. So, and the more we are inspired, of course, then we can fully focus on what we are doing. So, and yeah, if we are blessed by the sadhu, by guru, to do whatever we want to do, if we really understand, if we really know what we are doing, and if we feel inspiration or enthusiasm about whatever we are doing, then we can actually ensure that we are acting under the guidance of the Supreme Lord in the heart. So there is much more to that. There are many more details. It says that devil is in details. So, but we won't take much more time, and we can open up for questions and comments if there are. And I can ask you the first question: how many of you are inspired to be under the guidance of the Supreme Lord in the heart all the time? Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's important to be motivated. So let's see if there are any questions or comments, complaints, suggestions. You're welcome to share them. Prabhu?
How do you distinguish between what your mind is saying and what your conscience or spirit soul is saying?
Very good question. How to distinguish the voice of the mind from the voice of the supersoul in the heart, or the Lord in the heart. There are many distinctions, and I suppose the first and foremost is that the mind is always very loud, and supersoul tends to be very quiet and not to speak unless absolutely necessary, unless we want supersoul to give us advice. And so then, of course, another characteristic is that supersoul will always speak exactly same thing what Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita. And the process of spiritual advancement has many traps, and that's why what did Jesus Christ said, that many are called but few are chosen, right? And then Bhagavad Gita says, Manushyanam sahasrishu, of many thousands of men, very few actually advance spiritually, and even less come to me. And so there are two major pitfalls, and again, it falls into the same duality, the same binary mental system, right? Acceptance and rejecting, accepting and rejecting, and these two major pitfalls are that, of course, it's not always easy to, control the mind and follow spiritual discipline. And many times, if we decide to follow strictly, then it becomes kind of hard at some point, and we might think, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to torture myself in this way? Can't I live as most of the people do, right? But then if we're connected to the supersoul, because sometimes our mind can tell us also that, it's all useless what you're doing. You would not succeed, right? Just relax, chill out, drop your standards. But then if we're sincere and if we're connected to the supersoul, we'll hear the exactly same thing what Krishna said in the beginning of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Kutastvam kashmalamidam vishami samupasthitam manarya drishtam asvargyam akirtikaram Arjuna. That, Arjuna, how these impurities started influencing you, that this kind of thinking will not bring you to the highest realm. It will bring you, it will defame you. You will just embarrass yourself in this way. And so if we hear this, because as they say, you give Maya an inch, she will take the mile. So, the more we give in to the Maya's influence, the more we start sinking without actually realizing that. Like that frog which gets boiled in the gradually heated water, like that. And we've seen those examples, unfortunately. So we will end up being embarrassed if we start giving in. But then, if we are really serious about following Krishna consciousness, then we'll succeed in many ways, and we'll have some, remarkable achievements in our spiritual practice. And then the second trap, which is even worse than the first one, is to think, oh, that's me. I have done that, right? False ego. Pride, which is the first and foremost demoniac quality we can understand from the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And then if we are sincere, then we'll also hear the same voice of the supersoul. Prakriti kriya manani gunai karmani sarvashaha ahankaro vimutatma kartaham iti manyate. That's 327. That the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of the false ego, thinks oneself to be the doer, even though all the activities are done by the three modes of nature. And so if we are sincere, and if we think, I've done that, and why others are not recognizing what I've done, why others are not recognizing my special position and special achievements, probably they're just jealous of me or something like that, right? But then if we hear that voice of the supersoul, we can understand, no, it's all Krishna's mercy, it's Vaishnava's mercy. Krishna has given me everything, and I've just been lucky enough. If we are sincere in Krishna consciousness, we'll never feel that we are better than anyone else. We'll only feel that we are more fortunate than others, right? that we've been recipients of the causeless mercy of Guru and Krishna. And so then we can understand, no, I can take no credit. I've just been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, and the circumstances were right. That's why I've succeeded. So like that, yes. If we hear the voice of the Supersoul, it will be exactly the same thing what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna doesn't change his opinions. His opinions are eternal. Please prove.
So sometimes it's not exactly what's in the Bhagavad Gita. You may be sitting in traffic and this intuition or this voice says, no, don't go that way, go this way. And you don't go that way and you're stuck in traffic for an hour. If you would have listened to the voice, you don't go. So is that also Supersoul telling you?
It can be Supersoul, it can be the mind.
But
and so
immediately happens that you don't listen to that voice, and every time you don't listen, it's the wrong thing. Can Supersoul be also trying to help us in what appears to be mundane ways?
Yeah. Well, so we can get guidance from the Supersoul if we have a desire. And so, yeah, because the Lord is responding to the desires. It's very interesting how Krishna, Srila Prabhupada explains that so many people have so many desires, and everybody is praying to the Supreme Lord, because desire is a kind of prayer we address to the Supreme Lord. And then he says that the wealthy man is praying to the Lord, please protect my money from thieves. And then the thief is praying to the Lord, please help me to rob this wealthy man. Like that. So what shall the Lord do in these circumstances? Everyone, so many people have oftentimes totally opposite desires. So whose desire the Lord should fulfill? The answer is very simple. One who has the strongest desire. One who desires more than others. That desire will be fulfilled first. And so, yeah, the Lord will give us intuition if we have very strong desire. But yeah, it can be the mind also. So it is not always easy to distinguish, and therefore we were saying that the purpose, this is what's important. If our purpose is to serve the Supreme Lord, then we will be more likely to be guided by Him. And if we want to, sometimes it can be mixed. We can have desire to serve the Supreme Lord, but then get certain recognition and whatever material advantages from that service. So we can have this mixed desire. So that's very difficult. It becomes very difficult to distinguish where is the mind and where is the Supersoul. And of course, a simple thing is to check with authorities whatever we think is best in any circumstance. It's recommended, if you have doubt about whether something is right or wrong, in Krishna consciousness we can ask few senior Vaishnavas. If they say the same thing, then it's the right thing to do. So yeah, it's always good to come back to the first step, Sat, to check with authorities, to check with those who are advanced on the spiritual path. And in mundane matters, you have mundane authorities, at least those who have more experience like that. So I suppose the GPS system would claim authority in the traffic situation, because that's kind of collective consciousness. and the device which gathers all the information. So expertise is really important. Authority and expertise. I don't know how much that answers your question. Anyone? Yeah, please.
So from Bhagavad Gita, we learned that Krishna says that amongst all the senses, I am the mind, and sometimes and our mind can be our very good friend or also our worst enemy. And sometimes it so happens that sometimes negative thoughts come in, and then but another portion that we have learned from scriptures come to guide us and say, how can you think that this is wrong, and help us guide in the right direction. So I feel that you were talking about duality. I feel like there is negative and positive, and so is it the mind that's guiding us in the positive way, or is it the super soul?
Well, there are certain very clear signs that if it is the voice of the mind or voice of the super soul. So first of all, the mind will be very demanding. It's kind of fight, flight, or freeze response, right? That's the mind. So whether it is positive or negative, the mind will be very demanding and selfish. That those desires will be very selfish. But if it is super soul, it will be according to Bhakti principles, which are outlined in Nectar of Devotion, the beginning of Nectar of Devotion, or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu lists the symptoms of Bhakti, right? Characteristics of Bhakti, 6 characteristics. Kleshagni Shupada, Sandrananda Visheshatma, Moksha Lagutakri, Durlabha, and Krishna Karshani, right? So whatever super soul will say will be to help us to become free from trouble and benefit not only ourselves but everybody else, because super soul is thinking of everyone's benefit. And then it will be leading us to happiness, etc. So, but probably the most important factor that the mind will always think only about us. It will be very narrow and selfish thinking, but super soul will be considering broader picture. So that's the main difference.
Is this the reason we are encouraged to hear from saintly people and read scripture so that we can have a better connection with the super soul?
Yes, if we hear the scripture, we can easily understand the Lord and easily understand the process of devotional service. And the most important thing in Krishna consciousness is to broaden our thinking, because materialistic thinking is very selfish, very narrow, right? But Krishna conscious thinking is very broad and all-encompassing, as Bhagavatam says, Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajata purusham param, right? Whether one has no material desires, all types of desires, or desires liberation, one can, if one is broad-minded, or as Prabhupada says, has broader intelligence, then one can be focused in one's spiritual practice and attain the topmost destination. So broad thinking, that's the preliminary stage for developing our Krishna consciousness. Prabhu had a question, and then, yeah, please.
Would you explain a little bit about the super soul?
Super soul, yeah, that's the Lord in the heart, localized aspect of the Supreme Lord who is serving as our guide. Prabhupada explains that in the same way as Krishna on Arjuna's chariot, he was not fighting, but he was guiding Arjuna, and it was enough for Arjuna to get that guidance to achieve success, to achieve victory. So in the same way, supersoul is not acting, but it authorizes everything. And so if we are taking guidance from the Lord in the heart, we can act in a perfect way. So that's why he is next to us. Thank you.
Question. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. You said you were a Muslim, and how were you inspired to come in Krishna consciousness?
How did I start practicing Krishna consciousness? That's very long story, but if we want to cut it short to one sentence, I was looking for answers to all my questions, which I could not find in neither Quran or Bible or any other scripture, but Bhagavad Gita made it crystal clear. So there is no book, there is no scripture like that in the world like Bhagavad Gita, which makes it so clear, answers to all the most important questions in our lives are answered so convincingly. So that's what prompted me to start practicing and still studying Bhagavad Gita.
So what was the question you were looking for?
Well, simple question. Who is God? And who am I? And what is this world? Where does it start? Where does it end? What happens after death? Etc., etc. No, none of those questions are clearly answered in any scripture except Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is the only text with this kind of knowledge.
So Buddhism has some answers about
Very vague, very vague. All these texts, they provide very vague answers. It's very hard to understand it. Even Bible, it's so hard to understand. Who is God? In one place it says that God is the supreme above all. In other place it says God was working hard for 6 days and had to rest on the seventh day. So it's kind of, it's really hard to reconcile, hard-working man and God. Why God has to work hard, for God's sake. Like that, so many confusions are there in all these texts. But Bhagavad Gita makes it so clear, and especially with Prabhupada's purpose.
Sometimes even after we take guidance from Sadhus, the result might be apparently negative, and different Sadhus might be suggesting different things also. There's confusion sometimes. So in those cases, how should we endeavor? And also, if we don't have expertise and knowledge, like you're saying the chit aspect, then should we not endeavor at all?
Yeah, 2 questions. How do we get proper guidance? Because the guidance can be bewildered sometimes, and if we fail in certain ways, does it mean we should not try, we should not endeavor at all? So the first one is clearly answered in Mahabharata. Tarko pratishta shrutayo vibhina nasavrishir matam yasyana bhinam Dharmasya tattva vihitam guhaya mahajunoye nagata sapantha. So it says that, there are so many munis, so many thinkers who have different opinions. And so, sadhu, there are different types of sadhus, different levels of sadhus we can understand from Srila Prabhupada's books, Kanishta, Madhyama and Uttama. And so we need to get guidance from those who are on the topmost level, because if we get guidance from those who are on the argumentative state, there are different ways of different methods of trying to ascertain the truth. Vitanda, Jalpa, Vada. So Vitanda means arguing, trying to defeat the opponent, and Jalpa is trying to kind of understand truth in polarized way, who is right, who is wrong. And Vada means conclusive truth, seeing the full picture. That it's not that someone is right or someone is wrong, it's just people are on the different levels of consciousness, and that's why sometimes there are contradictions even in scriptures, apparent contradictions, even though there are no contradictions in there, but different instructions are meant for different levels of consciousness. And so if you take guidance from the sadhu who is on the topmost level, you will never be bewildered, because those sadhus will not give polarizing instructions, right? It's only those sadhus who know only half of the truth, right? They would project their polarized views on others and bewilder them. And so, yes, of course, if we fail, it doesn't mean we have to stop trying, but we should continue endeavoring. At the same time, we should analyze what went wrong and try to improve. Practice makes perfect. That's the principle. All right, so thank you very much for your interest in the subject. And if you have... I don't want everyone to starve any further. And so if you have more questions, I'll be happy to answer them individually.
You'll stay here for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. We won't starve you either. Thank you again. We do hope you'll circle back to our temple, not in the near future. Yes? Yes? Yes. He's going to be speaking this evening in Baltimore, at the Baltimore Temple, and then right now, if you want to speak a little bit more questions, I'm sure Mara will be happy to spend a little more time. Yeah? Thank you all so much. This felt like just like the old days, right? Yeah. The before COVID days. So maybe we're getting there. Of course, everybody loves when a Swami comes to town. That makes all the difference. So thank you again. Thank you, Hare Krishna. We're serving lunch out there. There's lots of prasadam, so don't be anxious. We'll be serving all afternoon. Have a wonderful week, and see you all again next Sunday.